All right, hey everyone. I wanted to share some quick thoughts on Andrew Yang, the Democratic presidential candidate who recently came out as saying he opposed circumcision. Now, Andrew had to quickly walk this statement back because he got a lot of flack from the opposition media and from pundits who were really upset about his stance against circumcision. And so he said, well, I support a parent's right to choose, but, I went to a bris and it was fine. And at the same time, his earlier statement, he actually went on record and mentioned the Intactivist movement, said he was highly aligned with them. And I don't know that Andrew realized the flack he was going to get for that statement. So I wanted to give some quick thoughts on his statements and where I think he actually stands, because his initial statement was incredibly pro-intact and pro-intactivist. It seemed like he agreed 100% with the intactivist movement. And then his later statements are not things any intactivist would say. So where does he actually stand? And I believe that Andrew Yang is an incredibly genuine person. Every public appearance I've seen from him, everything I've heard him say, indicates that he's one of those people who actually says what he feels and thinks genuinely about the issues. And the issues he's pushed are not issues that you would pick if you were just trying to be a candidate who was respectable and won and was sort of the boilerplate thing that people wanted, or that pundits think people want. He's actually a very genuine person. So when someone asked him a genuine question, what do you think about this issue? He gave a very genuine answer. And Andrew Yang is the child of first-generation immigrants from Taiwan. So his family and his culture is a non-circumcising culture. He comes from an intact culture. And he kept his kids intact because he was familiar with that culture. So I suspect he didn't realize how contentious this issue is in America and what a hot button issue it is for the people who practice circumcision, especially the Jewish and religious lobby, which is a key component in both parties. So there are a lot of people who feel that circumcision is their religious and cultural right, and they have a lot of influence, and I don't think that Andrew realized the landmine he was stepping on by potentially threatening them. So my guess is that in his heart, he feels like the intactivist position makes sense. But he's also running for president, and he also has to deal with the fact that in order to get elected, he may have to work within the system as it currently exists. So I suspect that what he's going to do is say the politically smart thing in the future. He's already said enough that he can't walk it back 100%. And it was recently announced he's going to go on Ben Shapiro's show. Ben Shapiro is a conservative Orthodox Jewish man, and talk about his position on circumcision. I suspect he's doing this as a sort of damage control. So he wants to go on there and let the Jewish pundit class know that he's not going to take away their rights, because that's what they're really scared about. But I also think he's going to say the word intactivist. And he's going to mention it by name, and he's going to make a lot of I statements. I personally agree with this. This is my belief. This is what I chose to do in my family. Whatever you want to do in your family is okay, but this is what I chose to do in my family. And we'll see, he thinks the intactivists have a lot of relevant and useful information, which is huge, because Ben Shapiro has 2 million followers on Twitter. He has a massive audience within the conservative movement. And Andrew Yang is a Democratic presidential candidate. So he also has a significant following. He's going to be in every single one of the Democratic campaign presidential debates. That's huge. That is not something that has not happened before. And even if they just say the word intactivist, it will be incredibly good. Now, I know there's a lot of people in the intactivist movement who are really upset by the fact that it seemed like Andrew had walked back his earlier comments. And to that I would say, when Martin Luther King was trying to get civil rights legislation passed, one of the things that the sitting president, which I believe was Lyndon Johnson, told him was, I need you to make this politically feasible for me. And the meaning of that statement was basically that civil rights legislation, although morally correct, was not yet politically feasible. So I suspect that Andrew Yang needs, if he was going to ever pass any legislation on intactivism, he needs it to be politically feasible first. If you remember, during the 2008 campaign, Barack Obama was against gay marriage. He, on record, he said, I thought gay marriage was between a man and a woman. That was it. And it wasn't until it was politically feasible that he passed it. So later he changed his position, but I don't know that he really changed his position as much as that he said what he needed to get elected. And I would trust the earlier statement, the genuine statement, over the statement he made after the entire media attacked him. So those are my thoughts on it. I think that Andrew Yang is an incredible opportunity for anyone who cares about the issue of circumcision. Anything that he says on this issue is going to be news because he's running for president, and he's so far said very positive things specifically about the Intactivist movement. And as people push back against him, right now what the media class, the pundit class is trying to do, especially the conservative media, is they're trying to make him look absurd by using the word circumcision in the same name as his sentence. So, oh, look at this liberal, this libtard who said something about circumcision. You know, the Democrats, they just want to regulate your penis. And they don't realize that by continuing to push the issue, they're going to create a demand for information about the issue, which is going to be met by the Intactivist movement. And the more that people hear the movement, the more that people hear the arguments they have to make, the more that they're going to go, wait a minute, that's actually a good point. So this is, I believe, a tipping point moment in the sense that the tipping point is not when everything changes. The tipping point, for example, for the gay rights movement was probably in the mid-early 90s. That was when things started to change. Maybe a little later, but the tipping point is when you reach that critical 15% and it starts to snowball through the population. It isn't when everything changes. It isn't when you get legislation passed. You know, the tipping point for the civil rights movement was not when Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech. That was well after the tipping point because he at that point had the base and the political influence in order to make that speech. I think that the change is starting to happen. But what's going to come next is there's going to be a lot of attention on the issue, and honestly, probably a lot of hit pieces, because this is the stage at which people start fighting back when they see you as having the potential to have real political or social influence. So I predict that in the next 6 months, you're going to see a lot of hit pieces. You're going to see a lot of the pundit class, a lot of people who have connections to medical groups or religious lobbies or ethnic lobbies pushing back against the movement. And they're probably going to say a lot of things which are really hurtful and which are not true. And it's not going to matter if an attack is true or not. It's going to matter if it's politically useful to them. So you can tell these people that, you know, the mean things they're saying are not true, but it's not going to matter because it's politics. There's a presidential candidate running, and people will say anything about a presidential candidate to get rid of them, including attacking their allies by extension. So if you remember during the 2016 presidential campaign, there were a lot of people who went after people who had endorsed Trump or said nice things about him, or they went after Bernie Sanders' audience. They branded them Bernie bros and said they were all misogynists and went after them in that way as a way to discredit the candidate. So I suspect that there may be people who come after the Intactivist movement because they don't like Andrew Yang and they want to hurt him by extension. And there are also going to be people who see that the movement is gaining steam and don't like that and actually care about the issue of circumcision and are trying to prevent it from entering the public discussion in the way that it already is. So in December of 2018, I wrote that I thought that March 2019 would be the tipping point. And since then, we have seen doctors opposing circumcision on the Ralph Nader show. My film was on Netflix and was trending on there. It's still on there now. There have been numerous stories on the issue. Intaction and Anthony Losquero have been on a bunch of radio programs. Brian Arp has published many papers. There have been a number of news stories that Georgianne Chapin of Intact America has been quoted in. So the issue is getting a lot of attention. And now Andrew Yang has publicly spoken out on the issue, and so it's entering the news cycle in a new way. So I think that the snowball of the tipping point has started, but that what comes next, if that is the case, is there's going to be a lot of pushback. And at that point, we're going to see some real resistance. I don't know that there's going to be any way to debate the ideas, but politics is not always about ideas. There may be people who simply go after people who are involved on the issue and practice the politics of personal attack and reputation destruction. And that may be difficult. It may feel like a bit of a roller coaster. There's going to be points where there are things happening that are beyond our control. I don't. No one in the Intactivist movement has a direct line to Andrew Yang, to my knowledge. It's not like him saying that was something people put him up to, although there were people in the comments who asked him about it. It was something that was a bit unexpected. And so I think there's going to be a lot more unexpected events that are a bit beyond people's ability to control, and it'll feel like a roller coaster, but it's going to get out there. So change is happening. Anyway, I know there's some people who are a little bit upset that Andrew Yang has sort of walked his comments back, but I think he's doing the politically smart thing given the current political climate. It is not politically feasible yet for someone running for president to argue for a ban on circumcision or say that everyone shouldn't do it. But he has said he's against it, and he kept his children intact. And I think that any incremental steps that people want to enact, he will look favorably on. And I also think that if the political winds shift and there is popular support for change on circumcision, he would support it. So that is something that is a huge step forward, and I would not... there's a sense in which you always want to put pressure on people to do more, but I also have empathy for the fact that he is doing as much as he can given the current political climate, and that going in a more radical direction, although it would be beneficial to the movement in some ways, wouldn't be politically feasible for him now. And so I have empathy for that and feel like the role of the movement is to make it politically feasible for him. And that is something that isn't going to happen overnight. It's going to happen over the course of the next several months. And it will be challenging. And it will be a bit beyond our control at times. There will be a lot of things that happen that no one has... I mean, this is a movement. This is a political change in some way. And no one person has control over every aspect of that. So have fun. Hopefully you guys have found this interesting. Let me know, and I'll talk to you all later.